All right. Well, hello, discrete math. I am going to be talking about section 3.5 today. If you're wondering about section 3.4, I was kind of wondering why 3.3 was so long, and then I realized that 3.3 actually had 3.4 in it. So that video and notes actually took care of all 3.3 and 3.4. So if you're looking for anything relating to 3.4, just go back, watch about the second half of that video, and that should get you covered. So we're going to start in 3.5 now, starting to talk about discrete methods of sharing. So the first one we're going to look at is the method of sealed bids. Okay, so first off, just a reminder about discrete versus continuous. Discrete is going to be a little bit harder to achieve than continuous just because there's a lot less flexibility. It's not as if you have a cake or a pie or a pizza that you can just slice into whatever size pieces you want. With continuous, you're looking at, or discrete, you're looking at items that cannot necessarily be broken up, such as a house or a car or a painting or something along those lines. So it's going to be important to keep in mind that while both of the methods that we discuss in these next couple of sections have limitations, they're still considered to be the best methods we have available. Moreover, when they work, they're actually pretty well done and actually produce surprisingly good fair divisions. So, that being said, the method of sealed bids. It was originally proposed by Hugo Steinhaus and Bronislaw Naster around 1948. The best way to illustrate this and how it works is going to be through an example. So let's jump straight in. Suppose that we're looking to settle Grandma's estate. So in her last will and testament, Grandma played a little joke on her four grandchildren, which conveniently named Art, Betty, Carla, and Dave, by leaving just three items: a cabin in the mountains, a vintage 1955 Rolls Royce, and a Picasso painting, with the stipulation that the items must remain with the grandchildren, not sold to any outsiders, and they must be fairly divided into equal shares among them. How can we possibly resolve this? If you think about it, three items, four people, someone's getting left out. So the method of sealed bids is going to give us a pretty cool solution to this. So step number one is going to be the bidding. Each of the players is going to make a bid in dollars for each of the items in the estate, giving his or her honest assessment of the actual value of the item. To satisfy the privacy assumption, it's going to be important that the bids are done independently, meaning that no player is going to know what the other player's bids were before they make their own bids. The easiest way to do this is for each player to submit their bids in a sealed envelope, hence these sealed bids. Okay, so once they've been handed in, here are the players' bids for the three items. So you can see that the cabin was bidded as anywhere from $198,000 to $250,000. The Rolls Royce anywhere from $30,000 to $52,000, and the Picasso painting anywhere from $190,000 up to $280,000. So here's what's going to happen. Each item is going to go to the highest bidder for that item. If there's a tie, then the tie is going to be broken with a coin flip, kind of like we normally do. In this example then, let's go back and see what that means for us. So our highest bidder for the cabin was Betty at $250,000, so that will be going to her. For the Rolls Royce, the highest bidder was Dave, so that will be going to him. And for the Picasso painting, not surprisingly, Art was the highest bidder at $280,000. So while at first glance it might appear that Carla is being left out in the dark, we're going to have some ways to work around that, because also notice that there's a little bit of discrepancy in the values. While $280,000 and $250,000 are somewhat close to each other, Dave over here at $52,000 is probably also feeling a little bit left out. Okay, so again, notice at this point that Carla is getting nothing. Not to worry, it's all going to work out. It is, in this method, possible for one player to get none of the items and another player to get many or all of the items. Much like in a silent auction, it's just a matter of who bids the highest. So the first thing we need to do is settlement. It's now time to settle things up. Depending on what items, if any, a player gets in step 2, they will owe money to be owed by the estate. To determine how much a player owes or is owed, we first calculate each player's fair dollar share of the estate. The way you calculate a player's fair dollar share is found by adding the players' bids and then dividing that total by the number of players. In other words, if you were to add up all of Art's bids, that would add up to be $540,000, and then take that number, divide by 4, that gets you $135,000. So in each of the cases, if you add those up, you end up with the fair dollar share, which is that each person, at least to Art, he feels that 135,000 would be a fair share. Betty feels 130,000, Carla 123, and Dave 110. Okay, so we've already talked about this, the settlement. All right, so the fair dollar shares are going to be the baseline for our settlements. If the total value of the items that the player gets in step 2 is more than his or her fair dollar share, then the player pays the estate the difference. If the total value of the items is less than his or her fair dollar share, then that player is going to get the difference in cash. So here's how that's going to work out for each of our players. For Art, we saw that Art's fair dollar share was 135,000. At the same time, he was getting a painting worth $280,000. So Art's going to have to pay the estate the difference of 145,000, which was taking the 280,000 minus the 135,000. So the combination of getting the $280,000 plus paying out the 145,000 now results in Art getting his fair share of the estate. Moving on to Betty. Betty's fair dollar share was 130,000. She got the cabin. So if you take 250,000 minus the 130,000, you get 120,000. That's how much she owes the estate. So again, by getting the $250,000 house, but then paying $120,000 into the estate, she ends up with her fair dollar share of 130,000. All right, so for Carla, Carla's fair dollar share was 123,000. She got nothing from the estate though. So she's actually going to receive $123,000 in cash. So she's also getting her fair share of the estate. She's just getting it in terms of money rather than in terms of pieces or property. Dave was the last one. His fair dollar share was 110,000. He ended up getting the vintage Rolls Royce, which he valued at 52. So if you take 110 minus 52, tells you that he needs another 58,000 to consider to be a fair share, and so that's going to be the amount that he gets in cash. Okay, so at this point, let's think about what's happened. We've got our 4 heirs, which have received a fair share, and you might think that we're done. But here's the deal. If you add up Art and Betty's payments, so remember that they made payments into the estate, which were worth $145,000 and $120,000. So that was $265,000 coming into the estate. Whereas Art and Betty are receiving some value. They're receiving $123,000 and $58,000, which adds up to be $171,000. So if you think about it, once you've put everything in and then taken everything out and you subtract that, there's actually $84,000 left over, which we're going to consider a surplus. So what do we do with that surplus? We're going to divide that up. So the surplus is going to be common money that belongs to the estate. It's going to be divided equally among the 4 players. So if you take 84,000 divided by 4, that means that there's 21,000 left for each person. Which means in the end, our players are actually going to come out with an actually more fair share of the estate. Art's going to get the Picasso painting and only has to pay the estate $124,000. Now, again, that was the original $135,000 minus the $21,000 that they got from their share of the surplus. So again, for Betty, let's see how she came out. She got the cabin, had to pay only $99,000 because $120,000 minus $21,000 means only $99,000 to pay. Carla received her fair share of $123,000 plus the extra surplus of $21,000. And Dave got the vintage Rolls Royce plus the extra cash of $58,000 plus $21,000 more is $79,000. So it actually works out surprisingly well. The method of sealed bids works so well because it tweaks just a basic idea in economics. It's in most ordinary transactions, there's a buyer and a seller. The buyer knows the other party is the seller and vice versa. In the method of sealed bids, each player is simultaneously a buyer and a seller, and without actually knowing which one until all the bids are open. This is how we make sure the players stay honest, and in the long run, it works out to everyone's advantage. At the same time, the method of sealed bids, will not work unless the following 2 conditions are satisfied. The big one, each player has to have enough money to play the game. If you notice, there were some people making some payments in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. If a player is going to make honest bids, they have to be prepared to buy some or all of them, which means that they have to pay the estate certain amounts of money. If the player does not have the money available, he or she is at a definite disadvantage in playing the game. The second thing is that each player must accept money. It is a sufficiently large amount as a substitute for any item. This means that no player can consider any of the items to be priceless, which, as you can think about in an estate sale, there might be some people that value the house or maybe value the car because of sentimental value. We have to remove that in order for this method of sealed bids to work. The method of sealed bids takes a particularly simple form in the case of 2 players and 1 item. We'll look at that in an example here. So splitting up the house, Al and Betty are unfortunately going through a divorce. The only joint property of any value is their house. Rather than hiring attorneys and going to court to figure out how to split it up, they agree to give the method of sealed bids a try. Al's bid on the house is $340,000. Betty's bid is $364,000. So if you divide those both by 2, their fair dollar shares of the estate are $170,000 and $182,000 respectively. Since Betty is a higher bidder, she's going to get to keep the house and has to pay Al cash for his share. So, computation of how much Betty is going to pay Al can be done in a couple of steps. First off, the settlement. Betty owes the estate $182,000. Of this money, $170,000 pays for Al's share, leaving a surplus of $12,000 to be split equally between the two. That means that there is $6,000 going to each, which means that Betty only has to pay $176,000, and they both come out $6,000 ahead. So, method of sealed bids can provide an excellent solution not only to settlements of property in a divorce, but also to the equally difficult, often contentious issue of splitting up a partnership. The catch is that these kind of splits, we can rarely count on rationality assumption to hold. A divorce or a partnership split that's devoid of any emotion, spite, and hard feelings is a pretty rare thing. That's why you see a lot of third parties that have to get involved to try to make more rational decisions. That being said, that is 3.5. That is the method of sealed bids. We do have one last method, which will be 3.6, which is the method of markers. That being said, have a good day, everyone, and I'll talk to you next time.